Thanks, Graham, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we've had a few talks that are going to be a good sort of sequel into what I'm going to talk about, so that's great. I've got a bit of a variety to share with you, and if I get that to work, go that way, that'll help. As we've seen, lamb is competing. It is a protein source, and as Dave sort of alluded, it's competing, and it's got some very stiff competition, and we need to always be in front of the game if we're going to stay in the industry. Now, the interesting thing is, as someone's already alluded to, the lamb industry has made some great changes. It has actually transformed. I've been working in this industry for 30 years, and it has transformed. Now we have average carcass weights 23 kilos and above. And that's due to genetics and management, and we can say, okay, that's great. We know that there's been some negatives from that also, but one of the consequences and one of the things that we've looked at in the sheep CRC is you get heavier carcass weights, you also get bigger cut weights. Now, Roger said that he can break up anything for anything, and that's great. But on the domestic market, it's probably a bit more limited. And we know that the demographic in this country is now 1 and 2 people households, and they don't live really here, they live over there on the other side of the range. And they're the people that are actually buying our lamb and spending the money. So the question is, what do we do about that? What do we know about that? We did a survey of about 900 consumers to actually work out how did they actually feel about the ideal roast weight. And so this graph here might think it might be complicated. You've got shopping frequency on the bottom, household size, and then the ideal roast weight. And essentially what that says is if you've got a 1 and 2 person household, which is the majority of households in Australia now, you will not want 2 kilo 4-quarter roasts. You will not buy them. It's about 1 kilo. And so for a 25 kilo carcass, how can we actually arrive at that? Now, thanks, Roger, for mentioning the Trim Lamb campaign, because I was really involved in that campaign, and it was a great campaign, and it actually, in a way, it did fail for particular reasons. It's re-emerged, and it's come into the industry now, and particularly in the last 5 years, with new packaging, because we've been able to take those cuts and actually make them last on the retail sector. And with that, there's been pressure to actually create new 4-quarter cuts. And when this extension of the sheep CRC started off, since that time, there's been a magical change in the retailing industry in this country and what we see now as options for the 4-quarter, so forth. But as a part of that, what we did was actually assemble all the information we could on every cut in the Australian Handbook of Meat. We looked at all of the information that was about that. We looked at competitor countries and what they were actually doing with the 4-quarter to see whether we could develop a new cut that would be relevant for the industry. And so we documented all that information in this thing. It's called the Information Nucleus. It's been up on the Sheep CRC website, freely available to everyone. And from that, we actually developed a new cut. We call it the Compact Shoulder Roast. Not very complicated name, but straightforward. And essentially, this was designed to offer an alternative, particularly on the domestic market, for a cut that was going to be 1 to 1 kilo in weight that would be suitable for the domestic market and for our modern consumers. So that's some of the cut work that we've done, thinking about consumers. The other thing that we've done is actually focus on quality, and that's a part of my charter today, to mention that. And way back, even before the Sheep CRC started, there was a major audit done across Australia to look at what the tenderness of lamb was like. And what that actually revealed was that there was a proportion of lamb, and this is a measurement of shear force that Dave was just talking about on the x-axis at the bottom, that at that time, based on the standards that we knew, we reckon about 20% of that product would have been actually considered unacceptable to consumers. Now, with the MSA work that's come along, we actually think that probably level then was actually even greater than that. So the issue was even greater. And that was actually a part of the sequel, if you like, to the MSA program. And one of the things that came out of the MSA program was that if you want to actually control processing, you need to control the rate at which pH decline occurs in relation to temperature. And this came really out of the beef industry too, out of MSA. We learnt from that particular industry. And essentially what it says is that you've got to have an ideal, you've got to hit that window to maximise the likely eating quality of the product at the processing level. Now, unfortunately, in CRC2, I think it was, we went out and we actually did a lot of work in processes to work out how much of their product would actually fit into the ideal window. And it was actually not much. It was actually very poor. So most of Australian lamb was actually not fitting into an ideal window. And we needed a massive change. Now, fortuitous as it was at the time, MLA had employed a very good engineer out of the industry, and he knew a lot about electricity and about how you can actually manipulate electricity. And the reality is that electricity ain't electricity, because you can change parameters about electricity And it actually does different things to muscles when you do that. And so you can actually, with that knowledge, design systems that will actually get you to the goal that you want. And what happened was, we all of a sudden had new technology that hit the market. And it was mentioned about Fletcher's and the introduction of technology there. Fletcher's Roger already had the one up here. He had a high voltage system come out of New Zealand, which was designed for his processing system. But the new technology, which is on the right here, actually is much more sophisticated in the sense that it actually gives us an individual response to every carcass, and it has many advantages. It's also safer. This one over here, not too good if you touch it, you're probably dead. This one here, you'll survive. Very important. Now Fletcher's actually, as they were one of the early onboarders with this technology, and we've actually introduced a lot of other electricity into their plant to actually help the whole process. They've done the most extensive of any abattoir in Australia. So the outcomes of that have actually been radical, and I actually have a slide in here, which was someone with a submachine gun, holding up someone. But someone told me I better take that out because the transformation in the industry has actually been dramatic. It's been the most dramatic processing application in the sheep industry, apart from the inverted dressing, that's happened in this country, where now we have most abattoirs have actually installed that technology and are actually using it right across Australia. And it's actually given us the basis to actually do what Dave's talking about with MSA. And you can do some sums, and we did some sums back at that time, about the benefit, even if a proportion of that product is actually improved. It's a huge payback to the industry. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at in this extension, I guess, is nutrient value. And we could say, okay, there's no overt pressure yet at the consumer level to know what the nutrient value of lamb is. But we know also that consumers are changing. They're looking for organic, they're looking for that relational stuff about the product that they buy. And we also know that they like to know omega-3 fatty acid levels, they like things with iron in it. And the basis of that was, okay, go back to this document we put together, what information do we know about Australian lamb? And it was pretty well none, apart from some data that came out of the information nucleus. We knew nothing about other cuts, what were the iron and the zinc levels in those cuts. So we set out recently to do some work on that, and here's 5 cuts to demonstrate the iron and zinc levels in those cuts. We can learn things about this product. This is grass-fed lamb, sourced out of a New South Wales abattoir, and essentially it tells us that there is variety in the nutrient status of those different cuts. So if you think about it, if you want a sophisticated marketing campaign, you say, okay, I want a campaign on giving you higher zinc levels or higher iron levels, you can actually focus that on cuts. Now we've done a lot more work in that area. I don't have time to talk about all the results. So what would I say? I'd say that Australian lamb, it's really had significant changes over the life of the CRC. The CRC has been integral to that, working with some other major programs like the MSA program along the track. And I'd like to believe that the processing part of the CRC in the lamb industry, particularly in, I guess, CRC2, which we did a lot of this work in and I managed, it's actually made a lot of achievements. I want to acknowledge a few of the people because we are talking about a period of 18 years. And for some people in the room, that's probably a large percentage of their life. But these are the people here that work particularly in CRC2 with a lot of this processing information. Kelly Pearce and Winna Tui, who's in the room, I think, today. These 2 young ladies did a lot of work in that area. I'd also want to acknowledge Ian Richards, who's ex-MLA, and Ian just was different. He was out of the box, he was great to work with, and he had some really innovative ideas, which got us over the line. Many other things we've done, I don't have time to talk about them, obviously. He said he's going to come up and knock me off the stage. Well, yeah, it stopped.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dave Hopkins.